We can probably start at 7:05 in about a minute. We had a great session with a local representative who conveyed how we could get involved at the local level. We had about 10 people in attendance, and we have had 20 to 30 people say they want her to come back and they want to see the recording. And we were having a relatively casual conversation at a library, and there wasn't a great way to record it because we weren't on Zoom, and we were sitting around tables, and she was getting up to show us some slides and walk around. And I will always record from now on.
Definitely. That sounds like a great forum to be able to get back in person.
Yes. Right. Well, I think we can get started, and I will certainly share, hope more people join, but certainly share with anyone who can't make it tonight.
Okay, great. Right. So I'll go ahead and put up some slides.
And Sandy, I can introduce Kristen as the Federal Policy and Advocacy Manager of the LWVUS, and she works with elected officials and agencies to help shape legislation and regulation to align with the League's policy positions, liaises with the Lobby Corps, and consults with League members through federal action requests. I can turn it over to Kristen at that point.
Yeah, so we'll actually dive into a handful of those items today, since they relate to that coordination piece between state leagues and federal. So I'll kind of go through some high-level advocacy planning things, tools and strategies that we use at the federal level, and ways that can connect to coordination with state and local leagues. So first, when we're outlining an advocacy plan, we have a couple of questions and an outlined all of this in an Excel sheet that helped me really plan out what's our goal, what's our timeline, what does success look like. And so I fill in this question here on the action planning about how do we get a certain party to take a specific action by a certain timeline, and that helps measure success. It helps plan at the front end and prepare for all of the steps in between, including targeting messages for a certain audience that you're talking directly to, whether a piece of messaging that you're using might have application to other audiences as well. Who might you not be talking directly to, but who is actually listening as well to your messaging. So this is just a good outline to plan at the front end to understand your goal and where the advocacy campaign is going. Then, and folks are hopefully mostly familiar with the impact on issues document, but always at the beginning of an advocacy campaign, we want to make sure that we're determining what the league position is on the issue or issues that we're working on. So, and this is something that LWVUS can assist with as well if there are questions about how to apply a certain position, because often, not often, but occasionally there's an issue that doesn't quite get caught in our positions explicitly or clearly, but there is a position that can be applied to still allow us to take action. But generally what's important to do in this step is to confirm that there is a league position that allows us to act on any given issue. The league cannot take action on an issue unless it is founded within our positions, which of course are voted on and accepted by membership. So it's key that in order to speak with one voice, all league members and the national chapter as well use impact on issues to guide our work and ensure that all actions taken at any level of government are founded in a league position. And in the case where there might not be a federal or national position in impact on issues, state and local chapters in their policy documents may have positions in there that allow them to act. So state and local chapters can adopt positions that don't, of course, conflict with national positions, but may go beyond national positions in order to allow them to act on certain topics that may not be specifically addressed at the federal LWVUS level. So then from there, and this is of course something that we do at the federal level, and leagues across the country do at all levels of government, identifying allies is really key to building a strong coalition and advocacy work, whether that's using coalition partners and connections in peer organizations, or looking to community leaders and advocates. Of course, building legislative champions through connections in federal Congress, state governments, local governments, or of course other leagues, other local leagues in the state, other state leagues working on regional issues, always bolsters any given action when we can identify allies to move forward on a common issue. And as leagues are choosing to take action and deciding what their advocacy action might look like, there are a number of different types of support that LWVUS can provide. And we'll get into each of these items in some more detail here in a moment. But as a member of the advocacy team, I personally respond to a number of concerns, questions, strategy conversations from leagues across the country, asking about how to take advocacy actions on any given issue. We have a litigation team who supports leagues when they are involved in taking or partnering on litigation processes. We also have support tools existing on our website from our communications team, as well as they have the ability to support messaging questions as it relates to state and local leagues taking action. And we have some organizing tools that support the advocacy actions that leagues take at the state and local level. So when leagues are looking to coordinate with LWVUS on a federal issue, that is required for leagues to complete a form we have on our website that just notifies us of the action that leagues are proposing to take, whether that's to send a letter, co-sign on a letter to a member of Congress, and it would need to be a member of that state or district's delegation in Congress, or if the league is looking to author an op-ed, meet with their member of Congress, join a coalition on a federal issue, or taking part in a press release or a rally, or especially if leagues are signing on to legal actions. Those are all examples of actions that leagues may want to take at the federal level that do require some coordination with LWVUS. So to highlight again, states are the ones leading the work in their own states and with their own legislators, but because LWVUS is meeting with a lot of those same members of Congress, we do need to make sure that that coordination piece is functioning, and that leagues are not communicating across state lines or district lines and stepping into the territory of other leagues. So that's an area where we want to make sure that leagues are focusing on their direct representatives and working only with those members of Congress. So this is an example of what you'll see when you go to our webpage, where the federal action request form lives, so that leagues can notify us and request to take a specific action. So the form will prompt you to fill out a bit of information about the action, how it's founded in league positions. It will have league members completing this form, fill out information about whether they want to be communicating with an elected official, which offices, if that might be the case, or in the case of writing an op-ed or letter to the editor, this form allows respondents to attach a document. So in this case, that would be attaching a draft op-ed or a letter to the editor so that we can review it. when folks are maybe considering writing an op-ed or letter to the editor, haven't written it yet, but want to chat with us about that, folks can certainly reach out. But ultimately, before anything like that is published, we do need to review a final document to make sure that it is aligned with the work we're doing at the federal level. Communication with federal officials. So anytime a league member in their capacity as a league member or an entire league is embarking on a federal advocacy action to meet directly with elected federal officials, members of Congress, then they would need to fill out this form so that we can work with that league to look at talking points, understand the messaging that will be conveyed to the member of Congress, again, just to confirm that we're all speaking with one voice and aligned on the messaging that's being communicated to our elected officials at the federal level. So just at a high level, these are some examples of the ways that LWVUS on a day-to-day basis is conducting federal advocacy. Of course, we're reviewing federal action alerts, as I mentioned. We often are writing and or co-signing on coalition letters and memos to members of Congress, as well as the administration and federal agencies. And then we do participate on a number of task forces with peer organizations working at the federal level on both voting rights and what we call our emerging issues portfolio, which covers a handful of issues that are still priorities for the league, but fall outside of the voting rights and campaign for making democracy work issues specifically. And this is just a list of some of the additional support tools that leagues can look for as they're looking to coordinate with LWVUS. So we do have 2 full-time staff members who coordinate directly with state leadership to do one-on-one state check-ins on a regular basis, especially while state legislative sessions are in session, to ensure that the lines of communication are open between state leagues and LWVUS to provide support, whether that's putting together testimony on state level bills, which is down here on the list a little lower. Legislative testimony writing is something that we've supported a handful of states with recently, whether they're supporting or opposing bills proposed in their state legislatures. We do also conduct bi-weekly legislative office hours, and those are just totally unstructured calls where folks can join to ask questions about policy, strategy, any type of question that the LWVUS advocacy team might be able to support with is fair game on those regular calls. We also are able to put together legislative tracking boards for state leagues. If you, as the state league, reach out with a number of search criteria and specific bills that you'd like to have pulled from your state to be able to put into a web page, and I think we can use like an embeddable code to be able to put that up on a website. That's also something that we can put together with our existing legislative tracking softwares that we use. I think I mentioned earlier interpretation of impact on issues. So if there's a question of how a specific position might apply to an issue, especially one that's not covered explicitly in the impact on issues, we can have conversations like that. And we do have a number of additional resources and tools written out, especially that have been developed as a result of league member requests on our league management site, which is what LMS on this webpage stands for. So then in the next step of advocacy, often meeting with legislators plays a role, whether that's a Hill or lobby day, taking a bunch of meetings all in one day, either again at the federal level or state level, to work on a specific individual issue, often in support or opposition to a specific bill. Relationship building on a broader scale as a lobbying tool is kind of just gathering information on what's moving, keeping an open line of communication with the staffs of members of Congress so that we are more aware of what's going to be coming down the pipeline, for example, and less specific to an individual bill. And of course, in any of these meetings, we want to make sure that we're coming in with clear talking points. It's helpful for LWVUS to be able to review documents like that ahead of state and local leagues going into meetings with federal members of federal Congress. Again, so that we can make sure that we are all speaking with one voice. And it just gives us a helpful way to have a sense of what's going to be happening at those meetings. So that when we're potentially, as the national chapter, in a meeting with one of those same staff members, we have some awareness of the conversation that has been had on behalf of the league with that office. So the next step in really formulating your action message as part of your advocacy work is thinking through a number of questions that help us shape this messaging. Who's going to be the audience seeing our messaging? How can we really maximize how our message lands both with legislators and the public? Because advocacy is much broader than just lobbying elected officials. How the public perceives an issue is very important to how we are able to show up on an issue. So we want to be really cognizant of who is impacted by an issue that we're taking action on, which specific communities, and how do we factor that into our action message so that we can make sure as best as possible we are inclusive in considerations for how we're taking action. Obviously making sure that we're communicating why an action is important so that we can make action messages resonate better with our audiences. Why is it important in a specific district when we're going and meeting with a member of the House of Representatives, or why is an action important to a specific state? And then who the action targets and why. Who are we asking to take action on our specific issue? So of course, when we're taking advocacy action, we have to prioritize how that happens. The public who is hearing our message has a short attention span, or often can have a short attention span. And so messaging research shows that it's important to have a clear priority on what we're writing messaging about. So obviously for the league, that means focusing on our democracy work. Our campaign for making democracy work is our primary priority all the time. So of course that's voting rights, elections, campaign finance, and money in politics and redistricting. All of that fit into our campaign for making democracy work. And of course, these are issues where the league is a leading organization and brings quite a bit of experience and expertise. So our next issue and outside of that are things that fall into diversity, equity, inclusion, and our emerging issues portfolio. So that includes things like racial justice, LGBTQIA protections, immigration. All of these issues fall outside of the campaign for making democracy work, but they are still priority issues for the league. And then third, and at the bottom of our list, is kind of anything that falls outside of that work. Things that fall into that bucket can still be priorities and can still be areas where the league chooses to message, but we do so less frequently, and really want to make sure that we are leaning into the work where we are most experienced and a reputable source where folks look to us to message on, which again is of course our democracy work. So we got into this earlier, but I do want to just really reiterate the importance of going into any meeting that we're doing with members of Congress or members of a state legislature with clear planned talking points to summarize the issue that we're working on and really give that elevator pitch in a meeting. Obviously, especially at the federal level, time is often very limited, and delivering a clear, concise message is incredibly important. So focusing specifically on some intel we've heard and received from research done by some of our partner organizations around voting bills specifically. I think this is really interesting. It comes from some focus group work as well around the terms that we use specifically for messaging on voting. So using the word freedom to vote, of course, that's been brought up a lot at the federal level because that's the name of legislation that's been proposed on voting rights, focusing on words like inclusive democracy and using the word voices to focus on ensuring that every voice is heard through our votes. We use the phrases voters picking and choosing our leaders as opposed to leaders picking their voters, which is a terminology we use a lot around gerrymandering and redistricting. Of course, the way we message on these issues can be really important in terms of how those messages are received. So instead of focusing on the negative, we focus on saying things like guaranteeing every American the ability to freely cast their ballot, and focusing on things like fair representation and making the promise of democracy real and equitable for all of us. And again, instead of focusing on the things that are broken. Obviously, occasionally that is necessary, but when possible, we want to lean in the direction of focusing on the good that can come out of pro-voter bills instead of anti-voter bills. Some of this terminology here will probably look familiar. Election security and election integrity are phrases that have become quite politicized recently, and we want to transition the way we talk about those into focusing on safe and accessible elections. Those small wording changes can really mean the difference in how our message is received, especially because these are all very politicized issues, and we want to ensure that as best as possible, these conversations are received similarly and received as positively as possible, regardless of the party of the audience member, whether that's a member of Congress or just folks on our website reading information that we're putting out about elections using these terms that do have less baggage associated with them, or fewer instances of being politicized as a term. So now I just want to quickly highlight a tool that our organizing team has put quite a bit of work into. I'm not sure if the League in Connecticut is using on a regular basis. If so, you may already know quite a bit about Outreach Circle, but this is a really exciting tool that allows for more relational organizing, can be used by members as an app to send information to friends and family members about advocacy actions that they can take. It connects folks to our Take Action webpage for federal action alerts that we've posted on moving pieces of legislation. And there are a number of actions that are permitted through this tool. And of course, if more information on this is of interest, our organizing team would be happy to chat more about what the platform looks like and how that can relate to the advocacy work done at the state and local league level. So I will wrap up there, and happy to chat more about any of these items.
Great. Thank you so much. It was a lot of great information. If you don't mind, I'd love to ask a few follow-up questions to one thing we're trying to do for our local league is pick up the policy positions in the new policy document for the LWVUS and establishing concurrence, especially in money in politics or campaign finance reform. Probably one of the climate change segments as well. And from what you were saying, that the position needs to be established in part of the priorities to be able to take action. Does it matter if a local league has defined this concurrence? For example, we don't often do studies in our local league, but we would be willing to go through the concurrence and the voting. Does that make a difference in terms of us taking a position and advocating at a local or at the state level?
So that I understand, you're just asking, it does basically the process that brings a position into your policy document change how you can take action on it?
Yeah.
So I would generally refer most governance questions to our governance folks, which we do have a number of folks at the LWVUS level who very specifically work on things like that. But in general, a position that a league has adopted is able to be used, and that concurrence process is a great option for lots of folks to be able to add positions to allow them to take action, but that don't require the extensive and expensive process that conducting a study requires.
Right. And in terms of the meetings with representatives and senators, has that gone mostly back in person from the virtual relationships?
I don't know that I would say mostly. I think it's probably pretty 50-50. There's definitely the ability now to have in-person meetings. There was kind of a process, a transition process from virtual to in-person. At first, you had to have an escort. You could only go to individual meetings that you had scheduled in advance and have a representative from the office you were meeting with come and get you at the front of the building. And now that's not the case anymore. You just pass through security and can take any meetings in any of those federal House and Senate buildings in person. I would say, though, depending on the staff, sometimes Zoom is still what their first offer is to set up a meeting, because it has become so second nature to just go to that virtual space.
Right. And do you have a geographic focus? I know you mentioned that there are state check-ins. Is that someone else that does the state check-ins, or?
So I focus exclusively at the federal level.
Okay.
Of course, like today, that sometimes does mean working with state and local leagues, especially when they're looking to take federal action. So we do have 2 team members who split the country, each 25 states that they directly oversee, and then they work with the leadership of each of those state leagues to get a better sense of what's happening in those states and give them the support tools they need in order to conduct state level advocacy.
And how much does the likelihood of legislation passing influence the amount of energy going into advocacy?
That's always a good question, and it's always one that we're asking ourselves, because we do want the league's name to be used wisely in terms of, and this is just like considerations that we are making at the federal level as LWVUS. We're always asking ourselves how much energy and resources we have to devote to like a messaging bill, for example. Sometimes the answer is we don't have the ability to focus on legislation that we know isn't going to pass. We know what the dynamics are in our federal legislature right now, and so often our primary focus is around supporting things that we know are moving.
Right. Sandy, do you have any questions?
Not really, but I just wanted to say that one thing that I've gotten out of this, everything that we do should be in a positive way to do it. Don't get into a negative. When you're going to write something or speak to somebody, speak in a positive way rather than a negative way. And I think that's very important. People get stuck on the words, and that's one thing that you I think stressed quite often there. I like that very much. I think that we do a lot, this group, our league here, we do a lot of these things. And we have done, we used to have a luncheon for our state officials, and for some reason we didn't do it this year. I don't know why. I think maybe we weren't getting so much cooperation with it, but that seemed to work pretty good. But now we're trying to do more locally. I think some of our people do have our officials, senators and representatives have their own meetings, little meetings and things like that. And I think it would be important for us to attend them and again, make sure that we have positive statements and things like that. Maybe I haven't thought about all this stuff before, so I'm not being very very helpful. But this wasn't my bailiwick here, but I'm trying to learn as much as I can. So this has been very good. Thank you.
Yeah, I do know last year and this year we had a tentative luncheon and meeting with the representatives scheduled to go up to the State House in Hartford, and we have not gotten it lined up. Which has been frustrating. So I think that is a great way to involve the league members and get them more in touch. Working at the local level is certainly effective as well. But I think that connection to the State House is important. What have been some of your key learnings since you've been in this position?
I think it's kind of what you were just touching on, is just the importance of state and local government. I think that's always been apparent, but especially when we're looking at a Congress that's having so much difficulty. Just, we know that on their docket for this entire session is going to be the bare minimum. Keeping the government open is going to be a struggle and a primary focus in a lot of cases at the federal level, but there is just so much more room to move at even the state level oftentimes. To actually see the impact of the advocacy work that we're doing. It was really exciting to have some big voting rights bills in last Congress. And unfortunately, of course, those were not able to be passed last session, and won't be for the foreseeable future. But it's been really inspiring to see state legislatures pass voting rights protections, pass equal rights amendments of their own. enshrine reproductive freedoms at the state level, in whether in their constitution or in ballot measures, direct democracy to support league priorities. That's been just really inspiring to see, and often times things that are driven by the work of league members. Early voting that Connecticut was able to put into place last year with, of course, the support of the league in Connecticut. So that's, I think, where we're always looking when wins at the federal level are more limited.
Right. I know it's not your area of expertise, but what are the key legislative issues right now? I'm sorry, in terms of litigation.
Oh, so not being directly involved, but we're of course watching cases in the Supreme Court like Moore v. Harper, which we were able to bring in a number of league members from across the country for a rally last fall to really publicize information about this case, which I think is, given how many big cases the Supreme Court has taken on in the past year, this one doesn't necessarily rise up to public awareness because it's comes from a redistricting case in North Carolina, and so it's not as clearly connected to enshrining and protecting our day-to-day rights. But if the Supreme Court, whenever they put out their ruling, which we expect could be soon, if they side with the North Carolina legislature, could have huge ramifications for how state legislatures are empowered to wildly change the structure for how election proceedings in the state go effectively, removing checks and balances to consolidate power in state legislatures. The case, I don't know if you're familiar with the case specifically, but the North Carolina state legislature created a wildly gerrymandered map. The state Supreme Court overruled it, was appealed to the Supreme Court, and there is a potential that the decision could come down and in the future prevent state Supreme Courts from checking the power of state legislatures on heavily gerrymandered maps. So that is a hugely important case that could have really reaching ramifications for how redistricting is done in the future, as an example of litigation work that we're watching.
Interesting. Sandy, do you have any follow-up?
No, I'm just trying to absorb everything. Thank you.
All right. So do you have words of wisdom to us as we go through this current legislative session in
Well,
Connecticut?
certainly,
Yeah.
sorry?
In Connecticut.
Yes, I'll certainly share words of appreciation because, again, knowing how important the work at the state and local level is, we greatly appreciate the work that the leagues in Connecticut are doing to support democracy at your levels of government, because that's where the good stuff is happening right now. And of course, we continue to work at the federal level, and we know that there are some areas where we might make headway in this current Congress to protect voting rights, but it's the work of volunteers across the country that keep the league going and keep the work moving in the right direction.
Great. Thank you very much. That was very kind, uplifting. Right. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. It's been great to meet you. And certainly if anything, any questions about coordination between with the national chapter come up, please don't hesitate to reach out and we can chat more.
Absolutely. And I will share this recording through our board meeting and through the membership. So thank
Great.
you for your time.
Have a good evening.
Right. Thank you. You too. Nice, Sandy.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.